that we need to also talk about the issue of the discussion of human rights, issues associated with the policies of home demolitions and wholesale village destructions that have been part of Israeli policy for 60 years now, starting with the massacre of Deir in 1948, of April 1948. So let me look at the larger context. Since the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, the Israeli government and military forces have razed over 400 Palestinian villages to the ground using bulldozers and earth-moving materials in a larger effort to remove Arab presence and their history. More specifically, bulldozers have a long history of use specifically as weapons of mass punishment and war by the Israeli military forces. UNRWA and B'Tselem, a Jewish peace organization, report that 4,170 Palestinian homes have been demolished since September 29, 2000, resulting in the homelessness of tens of thousands of people. This number does not count those demolitions by bombings or shelling. In addition, Israel has bulldozed hundreds of thousands of olive trees and citrus trees as mass punishment since the first Palestinian Intifada. On December 2nd of 2006, just in time for Christmas, Israel bulldozed a water well in Bethlehem. And the Israeli government says that its policy of home demolitions are for three reasons. One, punishment where one member of the family is accused of an act of terrorism. Two, military closures in right-of-way. And three, for illegal building. But let us examine these reasons carefully. The Fourth Geneva Convention, of which Israel is a signatory, specifically forbids the use of mass punishment of people in occupation. Israel claims the Fourth Geneva Convention only applies to occupied states, and because the Palestinians are stateless, it exempts Israel from the convention. So much for the spirit of the law. I seem to remember many Jews in Europe were also stateless refugees, and that the exact population the Geneva Convention was designed to protect. Secondly, Israel can declare anyone a terrorist and practices both extra-Jewish jurisdictional assassinations and long detentions, something the United States now does as well without trials, of course. In addition, in 2002, an Israeli army report concluded that there is no proof that home demolitions acts as a deterrent and that the damage it does overrides its effectiveness. This is an Israeli court. The army, itself. There was supposedly a brief moratorium on house demolitions, but since that report, Rachel Corrie was killed in 2003 in the midst of a massive wave of demolitions in the wake of Israeli incursions into the West Bank and Gaza that began in 2002 to put down the uprising or the Intifada. In April of 2002, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that bulldozers were used as a weapon in the killing of some 200 Palestinians in Jenin. No one knows the exact number of the dead. The Israeli government puts the death toll at 25 because that was all the bodies they allowed to be removed. Bulldozers were used to raise blocks of the city refugee camps and buildings in Jenin. And forgive me for this graphic example, but the smell of rotting corpses persisted for 3 months, and as late as August of that same year, the bodies of 1 youth and 3 adults were found. We also forget that in May 21st of 2002 of that same year, 100 houses were destroyed and another 1,000 heavily damaged and 1,500 less heavily damaged in Nablus. And many of the dead were also killed by shootings. And I acknowledge that there was armed resistance in Jenin, but it begs the question of the necessity of incursions and the rules of engagement in densely populated and civilian areas. Lastly, the arbitrary confiscation of Palestinian land without recompensation cannot be ignored, given that the Israeli government has a long history of ignoring and refusing to recognize Palestinian land deeds and ownership. And the Israeli land law of 1952 gives the government the right to confiscate any Palestinian property left unoccupied for more than 48 hours. That's how my family lost their houses. In addition, Israel has systematically denied permits to Palestinians to build new housing since at least 1967, despite Palestinian population growth. This is especially true of the areas in and around Jerusalem. And in 2005, 88 homes and thousands of trees were bulldozed in East Jerusalem. The building of a wall of separation has also been the cause for the bulldozing of structures and trees and the immeasurable suffering for the Palestinian population. extensively to prevent suicide bombings, so the Israeli government says. But one can predict the suffering of the Palestinians may spawn more resentment and hatred and also prove counterproductive. Unless we think that the issues of deaths by bulldozers is a thing of the past in Israel, on September 28, 2007, just last month, a 17-year-old Palestinian boy, another nameless Palestinian boy, they're always nameless, was bulldozed to death by an IDF bulldozer in Gaza Strip. So in beginning my closing remarks, I wish to call for a nuanced and a considered dialogue on the Arab-Israeli conflict. We have become a society that is far too dichotomized, and there's far too much name-calling in America over this issue. Our language limits us too often to homogenizing all Israelis, all Jews, all Palestinians, all Muslims. And this kind of homogenation actually eliminates and marginalizes all the peace movements in these groups from the discussion and places mass blame akin to mass punishment upon everyone. Tragically, the conflict is now largely under the influence of right-wing and radical politicians in the United States, Israel, and among the Palestinians. And let me remind you that a series of historical and political events aimed at marginalization and eliminating unified Palestinian leadership and replacing it with co-opted and weak leadership were factors in the democratic elections of Hamas. Issues of gross historic underfunding of the Palestinians in light of the $3 to $6 billion annually of U.S. money that goes to Israel, often not counted also the loans that we forgive Israel for military equipment by the U.S. Congress, and lack of accountability were contributing factors in the corruption that led to the election of Hamas. The election of Hamas was not a vote for terrorism, as so often falsely depicted by the media in the United States. And isolating and depriving the isolation and deprivation has caused untold suffering and near starvation conditions of the people of Gaza cannot bode well for future peace efforts. All of the recent efforts in the area seem to be only creating the possibility of long-term violence, and it is incumbent upon us to create alternative visions of peace and possibility. For this reason, I raise up the real heroes in this conflict, the Arabs and the Israelis that for decades have refused separation and deliberately created mixed Arab-Jewish communities, the women in black, the Jewish-Israeli lawyers that defend Palestinian prisoners and the rights of Palestinian Arabs, the Palestinian nonviolent movement that has its roots that go back to the 1936 nonviolent strikes that we started nonviolently against the British rule in the 1930s, and more recent rulers, including more recent leaders of the nonviolent movement, Mubarak Awad, Mustafa Barghouti, Lucy Nasibi, and I would also say thousands of others in local and international movements working for peace and an alternative vision of the future. Unfortunately, current politicians are making a mockery of the word democracy, and I fear the phrase bringing democracy to the Middle East may go down in infamy beside the white man's burden and the civilizing mission used by European colonialists. Therefore, I have a profound belief in what I'm calling humanistic pluralism. I take the phrase from a description of the practices of the Umayyads in Spain during their incredible period of religious cooperation between Muslims and Christians and Jews, described by historian Michael Hamilton Morgan in his book, Lost History, the enduring legacy of Muslim scientists, thinkers, and artists. That was a book I'm reading now. It's published by the National Geographic in 2007. And I offer the concept of humanistic pluralism as a model for peace in the Middle East and for harmony in multicultural Western nations like the United States. It is my sincere hope that Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and all the world religions can work toward a humanistic, pluralistic humanism that respects and recognizes the shared humanity of all people. And I hope you will join me in making that vision of the future reality.
Thank you all.